So welcome everyone. My name is David Shanton. I'm the Vice President for College Advancement here at Baruch. And I'm delighted to welcome you to one of our favorite annual events, which is the Benchmark Society Luncheon. For those of you who are not aware, the Benchmark Society is our recognition society for those who have included the college in their estate plans or have used retirement assets to support the college. There are over 600 members of the Benchmark Society, and some of you are with us here today. If you look at the ribbons on name tags, you'll see the red ribbon indicates somebody is actually a member of the Benchmark Society. So thank you to all of you who are. And if there's anybody here who would be interested in talking about what you might do to become a member of the Benchmark Society, please see somebody on the staff. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. So our appreciation for Benchmark Society members is as perennial as the legacies they leave to the college. And therefore, before we begin our program today, I'd like to ask everyone to please stand if you're able, and to join me in a moment of silence for our Benchmark Society members who have passed on in the last year. Arthur Rainsberg, Mo Boardwin, Norm Brust, Seal Gordet, Robert Hershkowitz, Angela Lowray, Paul Lumba, Robert Luciano, Morris Mansfield, Rhoda Olin, Mike Pashkis, Stanley Perlman, Mel Schoen, Richard Speicher, and Brendel Walden. Thank you. Please be seated. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you the president of Baruch College, David Wu.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's so good to see everyone here. I know many of you have been here last year or the year before, and it's always a great pleasure and an honor to meet with you. And I also noticed that in my now almost 6 years here as president, that this luncheon seems to be getting bigger and bigger, which is really a great sign. And thank you for your support. And so this is, as David mentioned, a little bit of a history of the Benchmark Society, and this is in many ways some of our most dedicated members of our alumni, and also some of the faculty and staff who are members of the society as well, and for your generosity and your dedication to our students, and in terms of making that kind of a long-term commitment is really crucial for Baruch to withstand its standing. And so, as you know, that Baruch has been making these really life-changing opportunities for our students for decades and decades. And I recently read, I don't know how many of you have, Andrew Ross Sorkin came up with a new book called 1929. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it because it not only talk about the financial market back in 1929, but in many ways also is vivid history of New York City. anywhere from, how the Empire State Building was built and so on and so forth. And most importantly, there are some very significant coverage and mentioning of our namesake, Bernard Baruch. And so, as you know, the Benchmark Society, as you see in the logo, the origin of the Benchmark Society is coming from Bernard Baruch, and who is famously sitting on the bench. He's known as the philosopher on the bench and advised many of the past presidents, and really been someone that's is a symbol of wisdom and judgment and public purpose. And his role is very much portrayed in this book, 1929, and in a very vivid way. And he's known as one of those thoughtful people who doesn't just go with the flow, and actually had a tremendous credibility and integrity at a very difficult time. And when many of the things that people are counting on are fading away, or about the depression and the stock market crash and so on and so forth. So I mentioned this because number one, this is in many ways the origin of the naming for the Benchmark Society, and another is that. Actually, Mr. Baruch's planned gift. This is our very first member of the Benchmark Society, member, if you will. His planned gift has established the foundation for the institution we know today. In other words, there wouldn't be Baruch College if Mr. Baruch did not had his planned gift done in the same way that many of you have. And so, as you know, he believed in the future of the college, and that belief has really inspired generations of supporters after him who choose Baruch as part of their own legacy. And today, I'm happy to say that Baruch continues to thrive as one of the nation's leading public colleges. And why do I say that? Of course, you say, well, you're the president. Of course, you're going to say that. But and I think there are many objective factors I can share with you that would make it true. And today we serve now over 20,000 students. And I talked to some of you earlier and reminiscent about the past, and I think. In the 60s, I think we serve about 2,000 students, and so that's a significant growth, and many of whom are first generation in their family to attend college, and as a matter of fact, more than half of them are in that category, and about 65% of our current undergraduate students qualify for federal Pell Grants. And so these are federal Pell Grants are typically offered to family household learning of less than $30,000 a year. So this is our, the 65% of our student population qualify for Pell Grants. And yet when they graduate, as you know, our students are competing head-to-head with some of the top institutions around the country, including the Ivy Leagues. And more than 85% of our graduates, they graduate without debt, zero debt, and which is certainly not a national trend, as you know. And 95% of them graduate either employed or going to some of the top graduate schools within 6 months of graduation. So 95% of them. So in other words, this is really rivaling some of the best institutions in the country, private or public. And of course, we also continue to receive this national recognition, and others start to recognize these achievements, and specifically the achievements from our alumni like yourself. And the Wall Street Journal now ranked Baruch the number one best value college in the country for 3 years in a row. Thank you. And this past year, they also rank us the number one public college in the Northeast. And so you may, for the first ranking I talked about, the best value, and you may be wondering, what does that mean? And not only, this is not only talking about affordability of our education, it's actually talking about the accomplishments of our alumni. Because the way Wall Street Journal measure this is by looking at the accomplishments of our alumni 10 years after graduation, and ask the question of how long does it take a Baruch graduate to pay off the entire expenses of their education. And for Baruch, the answer is 2 months. And I believe last year the number 2 was MIT, but I guess we don't really care about that. So this is really a testament of not just the price tag, but really what our alumni are able to accomplish with the education that they receive from Baruch. So we are very proud of that. And oftentimes, you're the last to be recognized in your hometown. And here in New York City, you know that many colleges have subway stations that's named after them, right? And so after about 20 years of trying, and finally this year, and we have the 23rd Street 6th train station now is named 23rd Street Baruch College. And a little bit of a background there, and you may or may not know this, but this take 12 state legislature, senators, and assembly members to co-sponsor a bill and passed at both the assembly and the Senate, and then get the governor to sign on it, and eventually instruct MTA to do that renaming. And to be perfectly honest, I thought after all this, it's probably going to take them another 10 years to change all the signs and so on and so forth. And I tell you, every time I take the subway, I check the signs. And actually, you take out your iPhone, you check on your electronic map, you will see that it actually says 23rd Street Baruch College. So I was actually very impressed with how MTA was able to make all the changes in time. And of course, this is important for our alumni and for our students, because our students not only come from the city, they grow in the city and they help to shape the future of the city. And this is essentially what the subway naming is signifying, is to recognize the impact that Baruch College is making to the city where we are in. And so the ceremony that we had was has a little bit of a fanfare with the CEO of the MTA and the transportation secretary and so on and so forth there to recognize this event. So certainly very happy to see that happen. And we continue to invest in Baruch's future, because you can never sit on your laurels. And I think I share with some of you, now we are the second largest business school in the US. And so we have really turning out some of the truly remarkable alumni and so on and so forth. And by the way, the number one is Arizona State. But they have a fairly large online program, so you only count the in-person population, we are the largest. So this is certainly good to know. But back to what I was saying, in order for us to stay on top, we have to make sure our students are getting the most up-to-date curriculum, and that's keeping up with the time. And I'm sure most of you would agree that while the world is changing rapidly in many, many different dimensions, one of the very direct and important change that's going to affect our students very directly is artificial intelligence. It's already starting to affect how they get their jobs and how they do their jobs, and how does the knowledge that they have learned in their accounting classes, in their finance classes, in whatever classes that they have, and how does that change the way they're going to do their jobs in their when they graduate from Baruch. So we have been working on this for some time, for over 2 years, and come up with a fairly comprehensive plan of how do we upskill not only our faculty, our staff, but also our curriculum, and so that we could prepare our students for this bright new world. And so we have launched a Baruch Artificial Intelligence Leadership Initiative, because we want to take a leadership role in this and not just following others' footsteps. So what's important is that we have the planning, we have the dreams, but without the generous support from some of the donors, and actually one of them is sitting right here, Helen Mills, and her family has put forward a very generous gift for us to start this initiative and to allow us to go from planning and dreaming into actual implementation. Actually, I had a kickoff meeting with a campus-wide core team yesterday. We have more than 30 faculty and staff and students that engaging with a top-notch industry expert to help us to get us ourselves to the forefront of this important revolution, if you will. And so not that AI is going to replace every job. Is people who knows AI are going to replace people who do not know how to use this new tool in a new environment. So that's important message for us, and certainly important for us to make sure we prepare our students for that future that's already here. And of course, this signifies in many ways why your support is so important, because in order for Baruch to stay on top, and we need the kind of resources, and we need the kind of support that would help us to take our ideas and the talent of our people and make that real, and translate that into reality. And so I want to thank you for your commitment, your support to make that possible. And not to mention, many of you help us to open the door to many of the students and many of the family who may never have the opportunity to do so. And someone asked me at some point, what's your secret sauce and why are your students so successful? And I think I've been always thinking about this question, and I think recently I come close to what I believe to be the answer. And I go something like this. I think if you think about our students and their background and their where they're coming from and so on, so compare them to, say, their middle class peers. And what happened is, for many of our students, this is their only path forward. And it's not like they have 5 other options in terms of, I can do this, I can do that. If this doesn't work, I can do, something else. And for many of our students, this is it. If we don't succeed here this way, there's no other way. And so if that's the case, I'm sure many of you share exactly the same story, and you're going to be successful, right? And I think that is, and combine that with the talent that our students have, and I think is in some sense not surprising that we are seeing the kind of accomplishments that our students are able to achieve. And I'm convinced of that every time I talk to one of the students, and could be a student athlete, and who has to travel to Queens to just practice, and while their peers could just go on the school athletic field, and they have to get up 4:30 in the morning to get to what they're doing on top of the full-time job they may be holding, and everything else. So this is really the secret sauce, and I'm sure many of you resonate with that message, and your support for our students means everything to them for their success, and I thank you from my heart for you doing that, and thank you so much for supporting us for what we do. Thank you. Enjoy the lunch. Thank you.
We're about to start the second half of our luncheon, and it is now my pleasure to introduce to you and ask to come to the stage the chair of the Baruch College Fund, Helen Mills, who is a member of the Benchmark Society.
Hi, everybody. So I've probably said hello to most of you, and it's always a pleasure to be here. So I think most people know what the Baruch College Fund is. So we manage the endowment for the college. And we have an endowment now approaching $400 million. And I think we should... Oh, thank you. So $400 million. I think we should give ourselves a round of applause, because we're not quite there, but we will get there soon. It's a wonderful thing. And we have grown tremendously in the past 2 or 3 years. And really since President Wu and other presidents, but I think you heard in President Wu's remarks how much he believes in the school and in our students. And that is why we're here. And when you have a president with his administration leading so well, and the professors, and getting so many capable students, it gives you energy to go out and raise money and to participate. And we're so happy that all of you are here, and many of you are Benchmark Society members. I'd like to just, if you could raise your hand so we can see who is a member. Wonderful. And for you who are here who's not a member, please consider it. It's a wonderful organization. We have this wonderful lunch. And my husband and I became members because we believe in the future, and we're optimistic about the future. And I think that that's what becoming a member of this society means. We know that Baruch has done well decades and decades, and that it's going to do well in the decades to come. So please join us in the Benchmark Society. And also come to our luncheons. The food was great today, and it'll be great next year. So today's panel is very timely subject, and I want to introduce the panel. The members are here. Could you raise your hands so everyone can see you? So the topic that we're exploring this afternoon is, who do we trust now? And that feels especially relevant today as conversations around media credibility and public trust continue to shape how we understand the world around us. We are fortunate to be joined by these 3 women, and I point out that our panel is all women this year. First, Vera Haller. Vera is a professor in journalism and the writing professions department, and an active freelance journalist covering New York City and international news. Her reporting has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Reuters, and PRX Radio's The World. We're also joined by Heather Schultz-Gittens, award-winning lecturer in the Department of Communication Studies and a proud double alumni of Baruch. a former journalist. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, NBCnews.com, and the Daily News, among other publications. And on a personal note, Heather and I know each other from her student days. So I publish something called offoffonline.com, and it covers Off Broadway in New York City. And Heather was my editor for a while. So it's so great seeing you, Heather. We're also delighted to welcome back Jana Kasperkovic, a graduate of Baruch's journalism program, who will moderate today's conversation. Jana is an experienced digital reporter and editor whose work has appeared in The Guardian, Marketplace, Inc. magazine, and other major outlets. Most recently, she served as Deputy Director of Platforms at NBC News. I know that we're going to enjoy this panel discussion. Please come to the stage and let's welcome our panelists. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Great. Thanks. I'm going to start with a brief audience activity. I know you're eating, but if you can indulge me, I just have a couple of quick questions, and I would love to see a show of hands for each. How many of you use your phone in some capacity to get your news? It can be using a news app, getting an alert, or an email. Okay, so that's a good number. Great. How many of you have an app like an Instagram or TikTok on your phone? Great, so a smaller number. Great. And then how many of you get your news from vertical videos, like influencers or like, vertical video that you just watch on your phone? Okay, only a couple hands. So Pew Research found that 1 in 5 adults get their news from news influencers these days. And among young people, those under 30, that number is up to 38%. So very different than the numbers in this room. I remember when Heather and I were just starting here at Baruch College, Facebook was only 1 year old. And by the time we were, I think, sophomores, Twitter, to tweet, you had to text to a number, and they would post your tweets. You couldn't even tweet yourself. So the news ecosystem has changed significantly in the last 10 to 20 years. And so I wanted to know, what do you guys think has changed the most about the news ecosystem? And how do you think it has made the misinformation easier to spread?
In terms of the evolving nature of the news ecosystem, it's, in my opinion, really due to the internet and social media. In my research for this panel, I found that there has been a deep divide in terms of the generations, in terms of how they consume their news. So for example, the majority of the students who come here at Baruch College, Gen Z, they primarily don't get their news from traditional media, such as newspapers and TV. They get their news from social media with influencers and independent creators. I teach a public relations writing class here at Baruch College, and in that class, I tell my students to make sure that they follow the news, and we have very in-depth conversations about the news every week. And where do they get the majority of their news? Social media. And from what they shared with me, there's a lot of mistrust in terms of the government and traditional news publications and all these biases around. So for them, they do their due diligence when it comes to vetting influencers and independent creators on social media, in terms of what's sponsored content and what's not, and making sure that these independent creators are transparent. But there's also a mistrust with the independent creators, and then there's also the factor in AI. So overall, there's just a lot of mistrust out there, whereas older adults primarily get their news from local news, national news, and TV. So how can we try to make sure that we're bridging that gap more?
I agree with like everything that Heather had to say. I too, when I was considering this question, really thought back to that moment of pre-digital and then the digital world that we live in now. And from a journalist's point of view, I think one of the things that has been kind of most vexing and challenging for journalists is the fact that journalists in a pre-digital age were the gatekeepers of information. If a politician wanted to make a comment, it would be up to journalists to decide whether that was newsworthy and whether that should be published and they would add the context in the background. Now, as we know, people go directly to social media to make their announcements. I mean, we have a president who has his own social media platform and where he is breaking news directly through that platform every day. So that's been a big challenge, I think, and one that we've tried to kind of, as journalists, deal with. And then the other thing about news organizations in this kind of new digital age, or not so new anymore, for me it feels new, is that they've had to retool everything. They've had to kind of physically change all the platforms. You think of a newspaper now, a major newspaper, they are going to have reporters and editors and photographers, but they're going to have a big video operation. They're going to have a podcasting unit. They're going to have a really big social media presence. You know, and when people ask me, well, what are the jobs out there in journalism? This should be your answer. You know, the way that everything has had to diversify. And if I could make one more point, this is a theory that I've been thinking about, is that when we think about our information ecosystem that we live in right now, where it's so fragmented and information is coming at you and you don't know what to trust, there's misinformation, I would say to you that I feel like that journalists and the news industry has a really important role to play in offering analysis and explanatory journalism, trying to tell people what does it mean, what should you care about, why is it important, right? And so, and I feel like you see that a lot, like, you know, 5 takeaways from this, or how, you know, what does the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz mean to, right? So those are kind of areas that, you know, if you want to be really pessimistic about the situation for news in our country, there's plenty to be pessimistic about, but I feel like there's also a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. Most recently, my job was to send news alerts. So, and that job definitely didn't exist 10 years ago when most news organizations didn't have their own news apps. We are on like our 3rd pivot to video in the media industry, so I definitely agree with that. Now, my mom loves Facebook. You know, it helps her keep up with friends and argue over Slovak history in the comments, but she also uses it to stay up to date on news, except from time to time, there are posts that don't kind of seem true, and you know, she usually tries to verify it or she calls me. But not everybody has a daughter journalist on speed dial. So what advice would you give to people who are trying to kind of navigate today's informational landscape? You know, is it just to be skeptical all the time? You know, should we be just constantly, you know, like trust but verify? Or, you know, and do you think there is a generational difference between, you know, the older generations, Heather, who you mentioned, are consuming news in different ways, and the younger generation? Or should everyone be vigilant at all times?
That's a terrific question. So again, this goes back to that generation divide. So I know with the majority of our students, Gen Z, there is a bigger focus on wellness and mental health. And they create more space in their lives to focus on that, whereas generations before, even I'm a geriatric millennial everywhere, even a geriatric millennial like myself, and then Gen X and the boomers, like didn't really have that space. So they're more intentional about the news that they consume. And I think that it's really important. I approach teaching from a wellness perspective. I do want to share that I'm not a mental health counselor by any means, but I'm very open about my own wellness and mental health journey. And I think it's really important for us to be really mindful of our mental and emotional state when we're consuming news, when we are bombarded by all of these alerts and notifications and dings on our phone. It's really important for us to check in with ourselves before we decide to share anything on social media, with our family, with our friends, with our professional network. So having that mental space check-in is really important, which I do believe the younger generation, they have a heavier focus on that. And then also in terms of the age generation divide, the older generation, there's more of a focus on curating hard news, whereas the younger generation, teenagers and young adults, there's more of a curation of lifestyle news and things like that. So I always tell my students to make sure that when they're researching for reports and projects or just trying to keep up to date with local, national, international news, to be really mindful of the credibility of the organization. And there's a way you could do that, like what organization has published the story, and is there a corporate interest tied to that organization? Like, what is the model of behind funding that news organization? Is it a mix of subscribers and also corporate interest? Make sure that they do their research on who wrote the story. So a columnist is very different than a reporter, and knowing the nuances between the two, that's really important. Making sure that you are looking at a news story from multiple angles and you are not just looking at one source for that. And there are different ways that you can fact check by yourself, such as Snopes and other reputable news fact-checking sources from major reputable publications.
Well, I would like to, I mean, you actually are right on line with how I was thinking about this question, is that I'm going to talk about an experience just that I had this semester in class. So I teach this course that's JRN 2500. It's the individual and the news in the information age. So it's literally what we're talking about today. And I work with usually sophomores, juniors in this class. And in the beginning of the semester, I canvass them. Where do you get your news? And the statistics that Heather was saying previously were reflected in my students. So many of them are on TikTok, Twitch, other kind of platforms, following influencers who, take whatever's in the news, put their own personal take, personal spin on it. And I say, I was listening, I'm like, actually I can understand that, right? This is where you live digitally. This sounds kind of fresh and compelling to maybe a stodgy newspaper article, right? But then I say, okay, so when the guy was talking about, developments in the U.S. war against Iran, do you think he was actually at the news conference where Hegseth made these comments? And they'd be like, no. And I'm like, yeah, well, and then where did he get that information that he's basing his take on? And, do you trust that this person is accurately interpreting what happened there, not having been there, right? So then that opens up the discussion about the whole journalistic process. I think it's really important. There's a movement out there called news literacy, media literacy, teaching people what journalists do and why it's important. And so then we go through the process, and you want to have news sources in your news diet, of where they're doing original reporting, where the reporters are out on the ground or in the corridors of power, who are speaking directly to their sources, who are seeking different perspectives for their story, or offering context, all of those things. Like, okay, you can go do the TikTok, Twitch, but also try to mix in, this is what I try to teach them, mix in, news sources that you really feel you can trust.
Speaking of news diets, what's yours like? Is that do you consume everything, or do you think it's healthy to kind of restrict yourself to some specific news sources?
For me, my daily news diet consists of Reuters, Associated Press, The Wall Street Journal, The Economist, The New York Times, NPR.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah, I am similarly like kind of obsessed with like the news. But yeah, because I do the New York Times, I do the Washington Post, I do the New York Post, I do a lot of local sites. I'm a very big local news, follower of local news, and including like the City, which is where Heather's husband, Hassani Gittins, is a top editor. And this is a nonprofit news website that does very, very strong news of New York City that you don't find anywhere else. So anyway, so I do a lot of New York City news. I also do BBC, CNN, usually check in on those. I like to see what different news organizations on different sides of the political spectrum are reporting. So sometimes I'll do like let me see what MS Now is reporting, and then let me see how Fox News is reporting that. And a lot of that is just because it's like my job to know that, right? Or try to stay on top of that. I do find it very interesting. And then like some New Yorker, New York Magazine as well. So yeah, like a lot.
Yeah. I think sometimes the way we use or what we consume or news diet can tell people something about us, or they think it can tell them something about us, right? For example, my dad is a long-haul truck driver, and he listens to a lot of talk radio when he drives, and it tends to skew conservative. He also thinks that because I read the New York Times and the Washington Post, and I listen to the NPR, that I'm listening to a lot of liberal media, right? It can be easy to stereotype people based on the news that they consume. Now, what do you think the options available to us, being able to find the news that can sometimes align with our values and the outlook on the world, do you think that's contributing to the partisanship that we see in the world today, and additionally to the distrust in the media? Sarah, you want to go first?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I think this is probably generally accepted that we live in a society that's very politically divisive, and that one of the effects of that is that people live in information bubbles where the algorithm and what they're following, only feeds them information that supports their views. And then not only that, but then like whatever's outside of their bubble is wrong and false, right? I mean, there's this kind of very strong, and I think that's, I think it's a real problem. I think.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback off Vera, we all have to be really real about our biases, and we all have biases, and it depends on the communities that we're part of, that we identify with, and our upbringing. But despite us having these biases, that awareness, we really need to check in with that when we're consuming news, and just be open and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if you consider yourself to identify more with liberal publications and news outlets, to get outside your comfort zone and listen to some conservative talk radio and read some more conservative news outlets, because it's really important to be aware of what the other side is saying. Like, you can't have a logically sound argument if you're not aware of the opposing side. And so, again, checking our biases. And I also want to talk about a little bit more about mistrust. And according to a 2024 report from the World Economic Forum, it talked about how this misuse of information through the internet, how that can be a threat to society and our public health. So going back to the divide in generations, so I know that the majority of my students, they don't get their news from Facebook. They're not even on Facebook. It's mainly Instagram and it's TikTok. Like I have to admit, I've never had a TikTok. But I do want to share that my 109-year-old grandfather-in-law, he gets his information from TikTok. So 2 years ago, my husband and I and our son, we were visiting my grandparents-in-law who are 108 and 109. You can Google them, Lyle and Dr. Eleanor Giddens. And my grandfather-in-law, he's 109, and my grandmother-in-law is 108, and they are the world's oldest married couple. And they are in the Guinness World Records. And we will be seeing them in Miami shortly after I have to wrap up grading and everything. So I remember when former President Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential campaign election in 2024. Who broke that story? My grandfather-in-law. I was in the kitchen talking with my husband and his aunt, and then my grandfather-in-law from his room, he was on social media, and he said, Biden dropped out. We're like, what? so we got that. We got that from him. So I'm not saying that some of the older generations are not on social media. So my 109-year-old grandfather is on TikTok. I don't do TikTok. Yeah. But sometimes I notice people are sharing things on Facebook. It's a meme, it's a picture, it's a catchy headline. There's no source, and it's like you have a graduate degree. Why you're a professional. Why are you sharing? Why are you sharing?
It's so
this?
Interesting that you bring this up, Heather, because I was working that weekend, and we had been expecting the announcement to come, and at all times we were expecting maybe it'll be a press conference, maybe it'll be an interview. And Joe Biden posted it on Instagram. He posted it on social media. And there was a couple of minutes in the newsroom where we were like, is this real? Was he hacked? And then we were just like, gotta go, it's the official account. But we didn't expect it from the Biden administration. That is something that we all are kind of used to with the Trump administration, with them posting on Truth Social, which you mentioned earlier. Yeah. But so speaking of mistrust in the media and everything, a recent survey by Gallup found that Americans' confidence in the media has reached a new low. Just 28% of those surveyed said that they had a great deal or fair amount of trust in newspapers, TV, or radio to report the news fully. That means that 7 in 10 adults don't trust the media. That is more prevalent amongst Republicans, but it's also prevalent amongst Democrats, 50% of whom don't trust the media either. Why do you think that is? What has eroded the trust, besides some of the misinformation, but what has also contributed to this?
Okay, I'll just jump in, because I feel like there's so much. Yes. I don't think it's an easy answer. It's not, this is what happened, right? I mean, I think the fact that, the political divisiveness of our society is very much behind it. Out of that, we had the rise of very politically aligned news organizations like MS Now and Fox and other news organizations that kind of undercut this idea of the news media as being objective and fact-based, right? So that really, people were like, well, no, I think that all news now has political leanings. And so that was very, very, we also have politicians who daily say that the news media is fake. There's a narrative out there that also underscores this feeling, and just the fact that this information ecosystem that we're living in, that's kind of ruled really by social media and the algorithms that feed off of it, they're more likely to promote misinformation and polemical statements and to be a traditional, to be kind of a professional, ethical, principled news organization in this environment, you're fighting a lot coming at you. That's really questioning your credibility. So I don't really have any answers for like how do we fix it, but except to keep doing, that ethical, principled journalism. Just keep doing it, right? So.
I agree with everything that Vera shared. It's, in my opinion, because of the massive polarization in our beliefs. and when politicians that are supposed to listen to the constituents and be in our best interest, when they're calling reputable news organizations fake news, that does send a message to all of us. And I find that with the younger generation, they want answers. They're searching for answers, so they're looking outside the box. And in my opinion, I believe that's why they're turning to these independent creators on social media and these influencers, and they're trying to find their news elsewhere. And in terms, like I always tell my students, you have to follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. And like when we see these news organizations, who's funding them? Like we follow the corporate interest, because again, like the corporate interest, there's going to be some type of conservative or liberal leaning when you follow those corporate interests. So I don't have an answer to that, but yes. Yes,
Let's start a movement.
let's start a movement. I'm with you. Yes. No, I do believe that we need to mobilize.
Yeah.
We do absolutely need to mobilize. I'm ready. Yes, let's start. Let's start. It starts right here. Okay.
You both have kind of alluded to this. You know, President Trump is one of the most outspoken critics of the media. He has called the media the enemy of the American people. He has called reporters nasty when they question him or try to fact check him. His White House has used AI images and videos, doctored, visuals. Most recently, he has described Iran war reporting as virtual treason. Has that surprised you? Have you seen, what do you think the public's kind of reactions to his relationship with the press has been?
That has a very negative impact on all of us. So this is like, you're in the Oval Office, you're our president, and to not trust the media and publicly put it out there, that sends a very negative message to all of us. And then when you have different governments coming at each other with AI Lego videos, what does that say to us? What does that say to us? What are we to believe? Like, we need to get back to trusting journalists. But again, like I said with my students, trust is earned, it is not given. Like, you need to earn trust. It is built. And how can the traditional newspapers and TV stations, what can they do to earn the trust of more of the younger generation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the second Trump administration has been much more openly acting against the news media in a way to kind of chill or curb press freedoms in our country. I'm just speaking that kind of factually. From the restrictions that they've put on reporters covering the Pentagon, to actually searching the home of a Washington Post reporter who had been using anonymous sources to report on the DOJ cutbacks in government agencies, to actual lawsuits that Trump has brought against news organizations, to calling to publicly humiliating journalists personally. There's just been a lot. What I hope, and I don't know. I mean, again, the news organizations that chose not to live with the restrictions that the Pentagon wanted to put on reporters working out of the press room there, they continue to cover the Pentagon, but just from a different location, right? Like, you're as a journalist, you're going to keep doing it. You're not going to give up. But what I'm hoping that perhaps, I don't know if you guys would agree with me or not, it's almost like something that I would be interested to hear from you, is do you think that the American public puts enough weight on the First Amendment and press freedoms in our country to at some point say, wait a minute, like this is not okay, like what we're doing to limit the way journalists can cover the government, right? So, I'm hoping that there might be, some kind of a public like reckoning with the fact that certain rights that we all are important to us and that are kind of part of our Constitution and who we are really being under attack.
Well, I think that's when people came out in Minnesota and look at the No Kings rally, because it brought people together to say, I'm not going to agree with these things, I disagree with them, and the whole city, people came out, and, Trump said it won't happen, but millions of people turned out to these rallies to say, I don't agree with your politics. What people have to understand is you have basic rights in this country. This country, we have more freedoms than other places in the world. But if you don't protect those freedoms, they will be taken away from you. And basically, you don't want that to happen. We have the right to sit here and gather in this room and exchange free ideas, and we have to protect those rights.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thank you. But like if you think about what we've just been talking about for the last half an hour and how kind of maligned the news media is, like I don't know like if the public, might rally for us, right? Given where we are in terms of public opinion. I don't know, Heather. What do you think?
I don't know. We have a lot of work to do. Yes, but we do need to protect our rights.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're going to start going into audience questions soon, and Angela's going to come around with a microphone.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. we
but
jumped ahead.
no, that's okay. But before we launch in, I just wanted one last question because, as president of the college mentioned, there's a lot of concern about AI, and so I just wanted to ask my last question as I battle AI in my own home, trying to get Alexa to turn on the right lamp. What are your worries about AI in news?
Mainly about the proliferation of misinformation, because like with these AI systems that we see, they're biases, they're faults in the algorithm. How can we see if the news is factual or not factual, and same with pictures and things like that. So I am concerned, and I don't have the answer, but I also believe that people were afraid of the internet a long time ago, and there are pros and cons to the internet. So how can we make sure that we are staying with the times and we're not dinosaurs and we're using AI ethically? And President Wu, thank you so much for talking about the AI committee, that task force, because I want to learn more about how to ethically bring that into the classroom, because I'm not going to lie, it's something that I'm not comfortable with, especially coming from a writing background and everything. But how can we coexist ethically and responsibly?
Obviously there's a lot of concern about jobs and what it's going to do, like any industry. And I believe that there's already some, labor movements, because a lot of the newsrooms are unionized. So, I think at ProPublica, which is a very respected investigative news site, there's talk of a potential strike by journalists over AI issues like how it's used, how it's edited, and protections for jobs. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. The one case I really wanted to talk to you guys about, or just bring your attention to, is at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So interesting that one of the editors there has instituted this new system where his young reporters who go out to cover like a city council meeting or whatever, they cover, they come back to the office. Instead of writing their story, he's having them feed their notes with an outline into AI. And then AI writes the story. Wow. It's edited by a human editor, but then the rationale, the management rationale, is that this frees up the reporters to do more reporting. Okay, so, okay, all right, okay, I see that.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of criticism and a lot of kind of alarm at this new kind of step, or this experience. It's really an experiment in how AI might be used in journalism. But like as someone who spent like most of my career as a reporter, like I can't imagine removing myself from the writing from the reporting, right? Because what you're bringing in is your observations, your news judgment. You want to bring in the telling details. You want to bring in the new, there's so much that you're bringing in like that. It's the stripping of the human elements out of this.
Great. Angela, ready? You had a question over there?
Yes, this is all very, very well done. My concern is not misinformation, but disinformation. Okay? There is deliberate disinformation going on, not only in this country, but globally. And there are boiler rooms in Eastern Europe with bots going out constantly. What happened in Minnesota? Our people reported on it, but the bots were even ahead of us. Okay? That is something that has to be told and taught to the students, because we are going to disappear. What is happening with especially the Russians? The Russians have enormous boiler rooms all over Eastern Europe, and even in Scandinavia they have some. And now what's happening in the Ukraine, okay? So that is something internationally that I'm very, very concerned about, because Donald Trump, we have no idea what he is really telling Putin and Ping, Xi Jinping. I think that we're getting towards a fascist nation, and we could read the Times, we could read the Atlantic, we could read the Post or whatever you want, but these youngsters are being led a lot by the bots and the boiler rooms all over Eastern Europe.
Sure. I'm not necessarily sure that I'd agree that it's just the youngsters, but I agree that there is a lot of to do on disinformation, and a lot of great publications have been doing research on that.
Yeah.
Hi. You had a question in the back? No? Yes.
Hi. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting lost all its funding. When the next Congress comes in, hopefully it'll be restored. But how do you prevent it from happening again? How can Congress prevent the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR, and we need a public media that's accountable to facts?
Oh gosh, I think like in a lot of different areas, like public health and all, global health and all that, a lot of people are waiting it out, right, to see what the next Congress, the makeup of the next Congress is going to be. So it's very difficult for me to sit here and say this is what should happen, because I really do think a lot of it is like dependent on our representation in government, that has control over the money. I don't know if you have anything more.
I know that NPR has had cuts just this week, just yesterday.
There's a big round of layoffs happening in NPR this week. Yeah.
And I've worked at Marketplace, which is American Public Media, and some of their funding has come from there. And those organizations are trying to supplement it from readers and supporters and listeners, right? And doing a lot of campaigns.
Right.
And
I mean, because I've done some work recently for PRX Radio, The World, which is an like a public radio, and there's been definitely a lot of churn and layoffs. But like donors are important in that regard. I mean, they had gotten some kind of a grant that from somebody who was interested in having more coverage about, I forget, it was very niche, like spiritual locations around the world. But that was hooked to the donor, right? And so then they were like they put a pitch out. They're like, we're looking for stories, So there's a lot of different things that do happen that kind of keep it going for now. But public media is really hobbling right now. Definitely.
More questions? Great.
I just want.
You were talking before about younger people feeding in their notes to AI. Don't you think that we're going to lose journalism with that? And secondly, if that happens, all the kids will be spoon-fed. They will just believe it. We've lost our grip
If I can.
if we just feed in notes, don't you think?
Yeah. I'll take this one
Good.
just because
Thank you.
I've been in the newsroom part of a AI pilot, and we never ended up launching the product because the AI just couldn't get to that final product where it didn't need human intervention. And so I think there is still going to be a lot of human intervention, and I don't think that we can rely on AI to do the job of journalists. It's kind of what Vera alluded to, where you need that human input, right? You either need someone to be doing the reporting, and then you need to be someone to be that final set of eyes and making sure that what you're putting out there is nuanced, it's factual, right? It has the right context. And at least from my experience with AI in the newsroom, it's not at that stage, right? It can be like an assistant setting up meetings and helping transcribe your notes, but it's not at the kind of colleague level.
Oh, there are positive uses of AI in journalism. I was going to say I didn't include this, but do you remember earlier this year when the Justice Department released that huge tranche of Jeffrey Epstein documents, and it was like millions of words, and the New York Times got on it, created a database within like no time at all. And I mean, I know this because my husband works at the New York Times, and so my little insider. And within like a couple of weeks, they were running training sessions for all the journalists at the New York Times on how to kind of use this database to search through these, something that maybe 6 months, like a year ago, might have taken months. But the use of that kind of extracting stories from large data sets, that's very positive.
But the reason why I'm not...
That's very positive, but that's not what I'm talking
Yes,
I
but that's the
know.
reason why I'm not necessarily afraid about the future being AI spoon-feeding things to people, is because I do believe that there are people in the newsrooms who do care about the final product that we are putting out and it being factual. And it's why we're testing out the AI things, and it's why we are saying no to it in some capacities and yes to it in others. And I can't speak for everyone, but that's why also you're seeing people at ProPublica striking, right? So journalists take so much pride in their work, and so I hope that, you trust us to try to kind of maintain the integrity in the product that we are putting out.
I don't know if the young generation has those values. I don't know that.
Well, that's what we're trying to do in our department.
Yes.
Instill that.
I hope you're successful.
Thank you.
Do you worry about students writing papers using AI and they become so dependent on it that when they go forward and they graduate, what's going to happen then? They're not going to question AI.
So, can I take that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So I teach in the Department of Communication Studies, and I focus on oral communication skills and written communication skills. And I can't tell you how many people I work with, like since I graduated Brewer College in 2008, including bosses who did not know how to string together a sentence in an email. And because of that, I did not know what they were asking me. So these communication skills are integral. And I want to make sure that I am learning how to use AI ethically and responsibly. There is a way to do that, but I do believe that our students, they need to be able to write and think for themselves and not go to ChatGPT and have ChatGPT do it for them. They need to have these communication skills in the workplace. There have been many news articles recently this year from, I believe it was Fortune, about how employers are quickly firing Gen Z employees after hiring them because they're lacking professionalism and they're lacking communication. So if our students are relying on AI to write everything, how are they going to succeed in the workforce? So this is something that I take very seriously as an educator, specifically in the communication studies department, to really help my students to find their voice, their writing voice, and their oral voice, and think for themselves, and not rely on ChatGPT to write a memo for them, to write an email for them. And I know it's easier said than done, but it does take a team, and it does take a community. And again, thank you, President Wu, for what you shared. We all need to rally together. Again, I'm not bashing AI, I'm not making AI the bad person, but again, our students need to have these communication skills, no matter what industry they're going to. Even accounting, finance, you don't need to be a journalist or be in communications. These are fundamental skills that employers look for in any industry.
Final question? Hold up, there's the mic.
How do educators know if a student is using AI or actually writing something for themselves? I graduated from Baruch in '84, and I've written so many things, and I just recently discovered ChatGPT, which I only use for what I consider to be sensitive items, and I personally love it. So I'm curious how educators determine if the student's doing the work themselves. Thank you.
I'm really interested in this because I tried to have AI write some questions for this panel, and they were pretty solid. Anyway.
Well, I can answer that. I mean, I've been teaching a long time now, and I can pretty much tell right away, because it's bland, it's perfect, grammatically, whatever, and it's not the kind of writing that I've been working students with for all these years. So, I think, I want to also commend President Wu for being very much on the forefront of helping us as an institution deal with these issues that you're raising. It was kind of like I kind of had a revelation about it a little bit. Like a theory that I'm starting to develop. If you give students very rote assignments, read these articles and answer this prompt, they're not going to find that kind of, that's going to be very tempting to use AI for, right? But I was teaching what's called a journalistic blogging course, where it was a bit more creative, and the students were writing on topics of utmost interest to them. And I was, explaining to them that, your voice, your style, the personality that you're bringing to this thing, this blog that you're creating, it comes from your writing. And, they were all writing themselves. I knew it, I could read it, I know. So it was kind of interesting, if they have a personal stake in the writing, I think they're going to do work for themselves. But if you give them kind of an assignment that's I don't know. That's just a very, very anecdotal theory that I'm starting to develop.
I think
What do you think, Helen? Did you have a thought on that?
I just want to piggyback off what Vera shared, and the writing, if a student is using AI, I can tell it's very bland. You'll see a lot of M dashes. And what I do is I like to do, I'm old school, so I do writing prompts in my classes where students have to take out a piece of paper, take out their pen, and then I get a feel for their writing voice versus something that they submit and just type. And if the voices are off, I can tell right away if they used AI.
Oh man, I remember doing the finals in the blue book.
We did those again.
Yeah,
we're doing those again, yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing. This was it was terrific. Thank you. And thank you all for being with us. And please come back next year. thank you to all of our Benchmark Society members. And I would ask those of you who are members to come forward because we will take a photo. We want a photo of all the Benchmark Society members. So thanks so much.